Hello everyone, welcome to the Movie Fanatics. My name is Brannick. Look, we all know the story. John Carpenter's Halloween, released in 1978, made a truckload of money, shot the slasher subgenre into the stratosphere, and cemented Michael Myers as a horror icon. Pretty much every fan of horror has seen this movie, and yeah, it's a good one. But go back to the whole truckload of money thing. Yeah, Halloween was wildly successful at the box office, and you know what that means. Boom. Sequel. Now, Halloween 2 is not my favorite thing in the world. It's not even close to the quality of the first movie, and it did some pretty silly things.
That Strode girl, that's Michael Myers' sister.
That never really worked for me. Now, I'd love to go through every movie in this series, but I've only seen the first two from the original batch. Halloween went on for so many movies, man. I don't even know what went down. There was like a satanic cult and Busta Rhymes? What? But in any regard, they rebooted it. And I guess that wasn't good enough, so they did it again. And this time they wiped the slate clean. As of right now, the Halloween canon consists of the original movie and these new three. And I talked about the original like 3 seconds ago, so this video is about this new trilogy. Halloween, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. This is your spoiler warning, if you care about me spoiling Halloween. 3, 2, 1, go. This one is a good start to the trilogy, a really solid movie. And yeah, this one is kind of half reboot, half sequel to the original Halloween. I think what makes this movie work so well is the balance of great characters and great horror. Again, Jamie Lee Curtis returns as Laurie Strode, and her character is significantly different in this one. Obviously, it's been 40 years since the events of the original movie, but those murders reshaped how Laurie would live her life. She spent her entire life preparing for the day that Michael Myers would eventually try to kill her again, even sacrificing things like marriages and her daughter's childhood. Her paranoia basically ruins her family, and the theme of this movie kind of is about generational trauma. Of course, Karen is the most obvious victim here. She lost her entire childhood preparing for the day Michael Myers would come back, even when it wasn't healthy. This destroys the relationship between mother and daughter. At one point in the movie, Karen asserts that Laurie's perception of the world is wrong, that it isn't the dark, evil place that Laurie says it is. And Laurie believes that Karen's ignorance is putting her and her family in danger. And the thing is, they're both kind of right. Laurie's constant fear is damaging to the family, but Karen's belief that the family isn't in danger is eventually proven wrong. The acting from these two is also really great. Except for this one scene where Judy Greer is really flat all of a sudden. I don't know what happened here.
I've spent my entire life trying to get over the paranoia and neuroses that she has projected on me.
Really though, the focus of this narrative is on Laurie's relationship with Michael. The whole movie is driven by both Laurie's fear of Myers and her desire to stop him. This movie also got rid of the familial relationship between Laurie and Michael, which I think was for the best. Part of the reason Myers is so scary in the original is because he can't be explained. The only answer we ever get is that he's pure evil, nothing more, nothing less. When Halloween 2 made Laurie and Michael related, it gave Myers a motive, something he didn't really have in the first movie. Recontextualizing Myers' reason for killing kind of takes away from the fear factor, I feel. In the original, he just killed because it's what he does. It was scary in the fact that he had no reason to. And by getting rid of the blood relationship, this movie can reestablish Myers as someone who kills because it's just in his nature to do so. I know a lot of people are split on this issue, but that's how I feel. But that scene where Michael goes around on a random killing spree is one of the best in the film. There's a certain horror to the villain being in plain sight, only blending in because he's wearing a mask just like everyone else. Honestly, Myers is great in this movie. And even though the profoundly eerie atmosphere of that first film is absent in this one, there are still plenty of good scares. I think the one with the motion-activated lights was really creative, and it climaxes in a really solid jump scare. The one sequence that comes close to matching the level of tension seen in the first movie is the part where Laurie is looking for Michael in her house, checking room by room to see where he is. If I can complain about one thing though, it'd be the parts where Michael doesn't have his mask on. The movie lets us know almost immediately that Michael is an old man. They kind of try to shoot around it, but it's still pretty apparent. I know we already saw his face in the original, but still. And it doesn't take too much away. It's easy to forget about once the mask is actually on, but it's still an issue I had. I think it could have been done differently if the movie was just shot to better hide his face. It's not a big deal, but it's worth noting. Lastly, I really admire how this movie did not overindulge in fan service and callbacks. I bring this up because this movie succeeded at being a reverent sequel without outright worshipping the first movie. I bring this up because that's not the case for all these movies. And I like the moments where they have shots reminiscent of those in the first movie, but with Laurie instead of Michael. That was a creative way to reference the original without being too in-your-face about it. All in all, Halloween 2018 is easily the best of this trilogy, and the second best Halloween movie I've seen. It's a faithful sequel with good character writing, nice tension, and a well-rounded story. This one's just solid. 7 out of 10. Halloween Kills. It does? Okay, this is the one I really want to talk about. Halloween Kills is the middle child of this trilogy. And it shows. This one is wild, and there's definitely a noticeable drop in quality between this one and 2018. Let's start with problem number 1, the characters. First of all, there's no main character in this movie for us to follow, and worse, this movie keeps jumping around from perspective to perspective, so it almost feels like the movie never really starts. The first scene makes you think that Officer Hawkins is going to be the main character of this movie. The movie opens up with him saying that he's going to kill Michael Myers, and then we get a lengthy sequence set in 1978 showing his motivations as a character. Okay, so he's the protagonist. No, he just lies in the hospital all movie. Maybe it's Tommy Doyle. He serves to rally the town against Michael Myers, and that's kind of all he does. He never becomes the protagonist. Besides, he later turns into an antagonist when he starts the riot that kills the old guy, so it's not him. It could have, and maybe should have, been Karen or Laurie, but Laurie's in the hospital the whole time, and Karen is right next to her, waiting for Michael Myers to get there, which he never does. Also, as a quick side note, why does this series keep putting Laurie in the hospital for the whole movie all the time? Doesn't it know how lame it is? Apparently not, because this is the second time they've done it, and it's the second time it's been stupid. Okay, so maybe it's Cameron, or Allison, or Robert Longstreet. They all go out to find Michael Myers, but they don't really have that much of an impact on the story until the very end, so it's none of them. It's not the doctor couple, it's not Lindsay, it's not Marion. They all get killed or kicked out of the story very quickly. And lastly, though this would have been cool, it's not Michael Myers himself, since we don't follow his perspective through the events of the story. This movie does not have a main character. It bounces from one character to another, and then it ends. Hawkins is the main character at the start, then it's the doctor couple and a few legacy characters, then it's Tommy Doyle, then it's Cameron, Allison, and Robert Longstreet, then it's Karen, and it's never Laurie. Because we as viewers are effectively waiting around for a protagonist to follow, it feels like the movie doesn't ever really start. Halloween Kills feels incredibly disjointed, and this is really the reason why. It feels like a bunch of scenes stuck together, but not really a movie. I think these character issues are also part of the reason this movie has such egregious pacing problems. It seems to flip back and forth, never really landing on a central protagonist. And if you want to sit here and argue that the main character is the people of Haddonfield, then fine, but don't get mad when I say that that's a sloppy way to write a movie, because it is. Another thing I had a problem with was that the characters are really stupid, and that's not a criticism I'd usually use, but they're extremely dumb in this movie. Because it honestly feels like the characters are making dumb decisions because the movie needs them to die. Take this woman who sees Michael Myers and stands still, watches him arm himself, and then continues standing still so she can be killed. Or Robert Longstreet, who goes to the Myers house and instead of calling for backup, goes in alone so he can be killed. Or whichever John this is who talks to Michael.
You've come home.
And then stands still so he can be killed. Or Marion Chambers, who says a stupid line.
This is for Dr. Loomis.
And then sits still after her gun doesn't shoot so she can be killed. Or this whole mob, which is made up of folks who take turns attacking Myers so they can be killed. It worked when you ganged up on him 2 seconds ago. What changed? Also, you guys are armed with, like, sticks? And an iron? Isn't this a small town in America? Don't you people have guns? And the best example of character stupidity is when this entire mob somehow mistakes the old man who walks into the hospital for being Michael Myers. For a town that is so obsessed with Michael Myers, these people sure don't seem to know that Michael Myers is like 7 feet tall, wears a mask all the time, and isn't a short, waddling old man. And I guess you can make the argument that once the stampede started, most of these people just got caught up in the whole excitement, mob mentality and all that, and they didn't even know what the guy looked like. Sure, I'm with you there. But then, when the guy is locked in the hallway, and the mob has the chance to get a good look at him, these fools still think it's Myers for some reason. Only after he splatters on the concrete does the whole crowd suddenly realize that it isn't Michael. Yikes. When the characters are this stupid, it becomes difficult to empathize with them. The audience doesn't care when dumb characters do dumb things that lead to their deaths. The script is also really weak. There are some crazy lines in this movie.
This is for Dr. Loomis.
But the boogeyman is coming for me. And he's coming for you. But he's not gonna get us.
Do you even know what that is?
It makes the pain go away.
And the whole evil dies tonight line was cool at first, but everyone says it like 4,000 times each, so it becomes very tiresome by the end. And as for the whole being reverent towards the original without worshipping it thing that Halloween 2018 did, that's gone. Halloween Kills is obsessed with the original Halloween. It's a very unhealthy relationship. All jokes aside, this movie just couldn't help itself. It talks about the original movie so frickin' much, man. The whole part set in 1978, yes, it's cool, but it doesn't give us any information that we didn't already know. Everything we learn in this scene we already knew in a single line of dialogue in the last movie.
Did you know our friend Hawkins here was the first responding deputy when Michael was apprehended in 1978?
The only really new thing we learned is that Michael used to look out his bedroom window, which is such a minor plot point that it could have just been explained at another time. Hawkins could have talked about it when he was in the hospital for all I care. then the majority of the cast of characters in this movie is just made up of characters from the original one. And that's not a big issue, but it does take the spotlight away from the characters of this trilogy. Allison hardly does anything in this movie. And this is a script issue / nitpick, but they say 40 years ago so much, and it becomes tiresome and repetitive. Maybe that was just me. Michael Myers has haunted this town for 40 years. He killed people 40 years ago. 40 years! Really, the saving grace of this movie is Michael. He's portrayed really well in this one. He's so incredibly brutal in this movie. It really validates the fear surrounding his name. He shows no mercy, and I like that in this movie, just like in the last one, he feels everywhere and nowhere at the same time. There's a fantastic atmosphere about him in this movie. He's really well done. The effects for the kills are also really good. I love the practical work they did here. They all feel really authentic. Though it was mishandled at times, exploring how Michael Myers affects this whole town is a really good idea. I do enjoy the theme of the town taking action against Michael Myers when it was handled well. He left a scar on this town, and I'm glad that this movie focused on people who were affected by Michael Myers who weren't Laurie. Even if I do wish Laurie actually did something. This movie describes Michael as being like a plague that infects Haddonfield, and I think that's a really cool idea. But overall, Halloween Kills is a strange movie. I don't hate it, it can be fun at times, but this one's definitely not the best. There's also an extended cut which adds some additional footage, including an extended ending. Both cuts of the movie are basically the same, so it doesn't really matter which one you watch, but I guess I prefer the extended one. The added footage isn't really intrusive. I like the part where Karen looks for her husband's body, and the added ending is better than the original one. The theatrical ending feels really abrupt. I like the extended one better, but it doesn't really matter which cut you watch. But like I said, Halloween Kills is a bad case of middle of trilogy-itis. It's much less consequential than 2018 and Ends, and it's easily the most forgettable. I don't know. I don't hate it. I don't love it. 5 out of 10? I really don't know what to say, man. Halloween Ends was not what I was expecting. Not at all. Now that could have been a compliment. I normally praise films for surprising me, for shattering my expectations, for being unexpected and unique. But Halloween Ends was surprising in the wrong way. To just get it out of the way, this one is my least favorite of the three. I was severely disappointed by it. This movie honestly doesn't feel like it's from the same trilogy as the previous two. If you take a step back and try to look at the whole trilogy, the first two pair together really nicely, but the third one just doesn't. It's difficult to describe, but this movie just feels disconnected from the rest of the trilogy, stylistically, writing-wise, story-wise. The majority of this movie focuses on this dude named Corey, who killed a kid he was babysitting and has since been shunned by the town. At one point, he bumps into Michael Myers, who has been living in a sewer for 4 years, and they have this weird moment where they look into each other's eyes, and then Corey becomes evil and is basically Michael's partner in crime. And all the while, Corey is dating Allison. Now, I'll start by saying that the idea of Michael Myers being less of a man and more of a concept capable of existing in anyone is a good one. But I will stress that this is a good idea on paper, and it was not executed very well in this movie. The theme is immediately made confusing because Michael chokes Corey, then he has this weird little flashback where he sees past events, and then after this point, Corey is evil. He's changed. So it's less like Corey became Michael Myers because evil can exist in anyone, and more like Corey became Michael Myers because Michael, infected him with evil. Which is really weird. I also really don't like how this movie devotes so much time to the Corey plot, only for him to be absent for the finale because Michael Myers decides to just kill him after all. It feels like the movie dedicated a lot of its runtime to a thread that never got proper resolution, being substituted for a final battle between Laurie and Michael in the end. This movie is trying to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to include this unique and different take on Michael Myers, but it also wants to have a big showdown between Laurie and Michael. At least at the ending feeling like it came from this trilogy, and the rest of the movie just feels unrelated. And maybe it would have been for the better if this was not part of the trilogy. I mean, the writing problems would still be there, but I would feel better if this was a standalone movie. And that's especially considering how this is supposed to be the end of the franchise. But this film is just trying to be too much. It's trying to be this unique story, but it's also trying to wrap up a pre-existing story, and it dedicates way too much time to the former. The bulk of this movie follows a character that we've never seen before in this trilogy and that doesn't connect to the other two movies at all. This was the worst possible time to throw away the ideas of the previous two movies. Honestly, this movie should have been what it was marketed to be, a final showdown between Laurie and Michael. Finally, resolution to this long-running conflict. Instead, that conflict is shoved to the very, very end, where the movie kicks Corey out of the story because it wants to indulge in finally letting Laurie kill Michael anyway. But it's all preceded by something that isn't that. It isn't what the trilogy has been building towards, it isn't what was advertised, and it isn't a satisfying way to end this trilogy. Not to mention, this film is hardly a horror movie. There are large swaths of time where there are just no scares, which you kinda need in a horror movie. Maybe you don't need big jump scares, but include some tension, just anything scary, because this movie is basically a romance film. Then Michael shows up, and then there's still a big gap before we get to more scares. I also will say that this romance is not very well developed. It kind of springs up out of nowhere, and these characters love each other after like a few days together. Plus, Michael takes a shockingly minor role, which doesn't seem fair to me because this is also the conclusion to his story, and he's barely in it. And as for a send-off for this character, this movie is laughably incompetent. He gets pinned down by Laurie and gets his wrist slit after like a 2-second fight, during which some flashbacks play that are so cheesy I became lactose intolerant. All for him to be thrown in a big old paper shredder and destroyed. His death in Halloween 2 was so much better. That's what we've come to. This movie is being outdone by Halloween 2. That shouldn't happen. This movie kind of feels like The Rise of Skywalker. It just threw its hands up and said, I don't know, and disregarded the previous 2 movies while making something unrelated and incompetent. Halloween Ends was very disappointing, and I really wish it turned out better. 4 out of 10. Okay, that was Halloween. Again. I think this trilogy had a lot of potential, but looking at it as a whole, it's pretty mediocre. It had a good start, a rocky middle, and a bad ending. But at the very least, these movies gave me something to watch for October, and I am glad to have watched them. They were never going to come close to the quality of Carpenter's classic, and they did not. But I still feel like I can go back and revisit 2018, and maybe even Kills if I'm feeling in the mood. And maybe one day I'll watch the rest of these movies. I just gotta know how Busta Rhymes factors in. It could be fun to do a whole series review one day, but that probably won't happen anytime soon. If at all. Still, thank you for watching me talk about this trilogy. I hope it was somewhat entertaining. I'm probably done for horror for the year, so we'll see what the next video is. Anyway, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching. This is Brannick from the Movie Fanatics. Signing off.